We are representing the Chicago Ridge Library. We are interviewing Ruben Alcaraz on June 14, 2018 at the Chicago Ridge Public Library. This interview is being conducted as part of the Project Next Generation grant for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and the Illinois Veteran History Project. Funding for the Project Next Generation grant was awarded by the Illinois State Library, a department of the Office of Secretary of State, using funds provided by the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act, LSTA. Can you please provide your full name?
My name is Ruben Alcaraz.
What is your date of birth?
6/2/1983.
Where were you born?
In Mexico.
Who are or were your parents?
My father is Ruben Alcaraz and my mother is Maria Alcaraz.
What are or were their occupations?
In Mexico, my dad was a bank manager and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. When we moved here when I was 5 years old, my dad picked up a job in a factory and so did my mom. And ever since then, they've been working in factories.
Were your parents in the military?
No, they were not. I was actually the first in my entire family that has ever joined the military.
What schools and colleges did you attend?
For high school, I went to Gage Park High School. I did some college in Richard J. Daley College. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I joined, I went into Northwestern College, and that's where I got my associate's degree in criminal justice.
Did you work before joining the service? If so, what job did you have?
I had a few jobs, actually. And they were actually after the service because I joined the service 2 weeks out of high school. So I turned 18 June 2nd, and June 18 I joined the Marine Corps.
What year did you enter the service?
In 2001. And to elaborate on what jobs I had afterwards, I worked at the Chicago Board of Trade. I was a broker's assistant. I did money messenger for Brinks, the ones that carry all the big coin and all the big cash and the big armored trucks. I did construction, and I also worked in a box factory before I became a police officer here in Chicago Ridge.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
How many years were you initially signed up to serve?
4 and 2.
How long did you actually serve?
7.
What branch of service did you serve with?
The United States Marine Corps.
Why did you choose this specific branch? Did you have a reason for joining that particular branch?
Yes. Ever since I was little, I would watch movies about military and I would see documentaries about the military, and I always loved the military. I was never much into sports when I was young. I used to play them, but not in teams and actual school teams or anything. I was always all about the military. I also joined JROTC, that's in high school. Instead of doing gym the 4 years, I did 4 years of JROTC. And the reason I joined the Marine Corps is, to me, they were the toughest. You know, they did the craziest things. It's true what they say, the few, the proud. It's the smallest branch in the military. And from the documentaries that I saw, they had the best battles, and that was my dream, to be in a battle. So that's why I joined the Marine Corps, to prove it to myself that I can do the best.
And what is the ARDC? JRODC?
It's like a branch of the military, like if it's a study of the military. It's called Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps. And it basically instills some of the fundamentals that you will learn in the military. You wear your uniform, you get your ribbons, you get your medals, you do competitions, you have drill, you have a sergeant that's in charge of you. So one period every day that you're in school is dedicated to that. So you develop skills like self-confidence, leadership, and that you can carry on once you enlist in the military. And if you enlist in the military and you've done your 4 years, then they move you up one rank. Instead of starting off from private, you start off at private first class.
What was the highest rank that you held?
I got out of the Marine Corps as a corporal, E4.
How did you feel when you started your service experience? Was it scary?
Yes, because it's one of those things that you can train for and out in the civilian world, but you never really get the full gist of it until you're actually there on the painted yellow footprints when you're in boot camp. And those footprints, to explain, it's when you already flew from whatever state you're in. You all fly to one of two training centers. I went to San Diego, MCRD. You get out of the bus, and as soon as you get out of the bus, drill instructor is yelling at your ear, "Get out of my bus, get out of my bus, get out of my bus. We own you, you are mine for the next 3 months. Get out of my bus." You have white painted yellow footprints, and you will remember those for the rest of your life, because from that moment, you've never been so scared as to what's gonna come next. And ever since that moment, everything comes like this, and you have to do it, you have to do it. So yes, it was scary at first, but once you get into like halfway of your boot camp and you've built the camaraderie with your buddies in boot camp, they're going through the same thing you're going through. You know that the reason that they're beating you down so hard is to make you a better person. Then you start loving it. You know, this is what I want to do. So the fear goes away.
Where did you attend basic training?
And MCRD in San Diego.
Where were you stationed?
In Camp Pendleton.
How long did you have to train per day?
In boot camp, it was probably 18 to 20 hours out of the day. We would go to sleep at random times and wake up at random times. It's one of the things that they do is they try to disorient you, so you're ready at all times. You had constant training. Even going to go eat at the cafeteria, you were training. You had to be the best. You had to be the fastest. If you weren't there first, then you didn't eat.
What was basic training like?
Fun, hard. It really teaches you what you're capable of. I've always said boot camp is 80% mental, 20% physical, because the physical part, that's what they're there for too. If you're weak in one aspect, they break you down even more and they build you back up. But you really get to know how much you can take mentally. And if you can push yourself, then you can do whatever you want.
What were your living conditions like?
If we're still talking about boot camp, it was called a squad bay. It's kind of like a big room, like this room, but it's more like a rectangle. And the floors are kind of like this, tile floors, and there's bunk beds on both sides. And there's just rows of bunk beds. And that is where you live for the 3 months that you're in boot camp if you're not out in the field. So big showers, a big chow hall. It's called a chow hall, the cafeteria. You lived off of a little box where you had your uniforms, your toiletries, everything that you needed was in that little box, and that was for 3 months. Once you get out and you join your unit, then it depends. Some people, if you're married, you get to be in a house. If you're not, you get to live in a barracks. It's kind of like an apartment building where you're pretty much on your own, but it's still a structured environment. Everything in the Marine Corps is a structured environment, and it never stops.
Could you call and talk to your family during basic training?
One time, I was allowed one phone call for the 3 months I was there. And it just so happened that when it was my turn to make that phone call, nobody answered on the other line. So both my parents were working, and I'm the youngest of three. My two older sisters were in school. So ring, 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 time's up. Next person's up. I didn't get to do my phone call. In the Marine Corps, you're pretty much shut out from the outside world. From the moment that you step in, you don't have television, you don't have radio, you don't get to make phone calls, all this during boot camp. The only real, I guess, connection we had to the outside world was because where I was in boot camp, it was connected to the San Diego airport. So there's literally a fence, a chain link fence. One side is our boot camp, the other side is the airstrip. So we would just watch sometimes the airplanes going in and out. And when it was time to clean, we would go and buy newspapers so we can clean the windows. And while we're cleaning the windows, we would try to peek in, all right, what's going on around the world? That's the only outlet we had.
How do you think boot camp affected you in a good or bad way mentally?
I think boot camp affected me only in a good way. Growing up, I was very shy. I was very fearful of what I could and could not do, what my limitations were. Little by little, I began to outgrow it because of JROTC. It also helped me so much, have some self-confidence, self-discipline. And like I said, boot camp, you go in and they mold you. They see your weaknesses and they fix them. They help you achieve better. They see your strengths and they help you get even stronger. To tell you, I went in boot camp and I didn't get to see my family for 3 months. I came back home for 2 weeks after boot camp, and I was in the airport, in O'Hare Airport, and my father was looking for me. I was in my dress blue uniform, had a big tan, I had lost weight, and I was going down the escalator, and I saw him, and he just looked at me. And he just looked at me, and he just looked at me, and I'm like, why is he not saying anything? And he's like, excuse me, do you know where Ruben is? Do you know Ruben? And I thought he was kidding. I'm like, ha ha. And I'm like, Dad, it's me. And he's like, oh my goodness. And then he just gave me a big hug. That's how much boot camp changes you.
What was the food like?
It was good. For as much as you can taste it. to elaborate on that, in boot camp, everything is timed and everything is rushed. So there's a saying that will say, you eat boot camp style, because we had so little time to enjoy our food. It was all about intaking the calories of the food that we ate. So in boot camp, we have to sit like this and just use the arm that we're gonna use, and that's it. No talking, no laughing, no nothing. So, I mean, the food was good if you had the time to enjoy it once in a while.
Were you able to have a social life? What types of things did you do for fun?
I liked running, hiking. I played sports with my buddies. Like I said, I never joined an actual team, but we always played sports. Shooting ranges, everything that you can think of that was an adrenaline rush, I guess. When you're in the military, that's pretty much what you seek out. So, I mean, we're a bunch of kids when it's our time off, when we're on our downtime. But that's the beautiful thing about the military, is that you and your buddies can do that. You can be kids, you can relax, you can have fun, but when it's time to do your job, when it's time to work, then everybody just switches that switch and you're back on duty.
Where were you stationed after basic training?
In Camp Pendleton.
Were your living conditions different than basic training?
This is squad base.
Was the food different at your new base?
No, same food. You were just allowed to enjoy it more.
Do you have any basic training stories you would like to share?
Sure. One of the things about boot camp as well, Marine Corps boot camp, is once you enlist, you're pretty much in. The only ways you can pretty much get out of boot camp and no longer be a Marine is if you injure yourself so badly that you can no longer serve in the military, or you get an evaluation from a doctor that tells you that tells them that you're not fit mentally to be in boot camp. So there was guys that regretted being in boot camp about 2-3 weeks in. So we had one guy, he jumped off the 3rd story to try to escape and broke both his legs. So he ended up, the thing is, he ended up with injuries that can heal and that would heal properly. So he ended up getting stuck in what's called a medical platoon and waiting out his healing time. And once he got healed, he was right back in to try to do boot camp all over again. Then there was another guy that pretended like he was not mentally fit to be in the military, and he was actually let go.
When you finished basic training, what position did you hold?
I was mortar transport. And basically what we do in mortar transport, we're the support element. We're the guys that drive all the big trucks, the big vehicles, the Humvees. It's any kind of big vehicle that you can think of, I can drive.
Did you receive any specialized training for the position? Do you feel that you received enough training?
I did receive specialized training for it. You go to, it's called your MOS school, and my MOS in the Marine Corps was 3531, which is motor transport. And you go to a schooling, and I believe it was 2 months, if I can recall correctly. And it was just specifically on the vehicles that you were going to be driving, how to drive them, how to fix them in a jiff, if you can fix them on the road or whatnot. If not, then there's the MOS for mechanic, that they're the guys that specialize in that. The schooling taught us enough to get us through, but you really learn your job and how to do it better once you're in your unit and you actually do it. Like anything, you learn something in school, and if you put it out into the real world, that's when you start picking it up more.
What were the rules in the military?
The rules? There was a lot of rules. Basically, you're representing the United States. So when you're in uniform, you conduct yourself professionally, and when you're not in uniform, you need to conduct yourself professionally. Sometimes we had mandatory times that we had to be back in our racks for the next day so we can go out if we had a special type of training happening. You were always answering to another Marine. For example, if you're in a platoon, you would be answering to your platoon sergeant. So all the rules came down from the top, and slowly but surely they got trickled down, and then you ended up getting the rules of the day or the instructions, and you just had to follow them. But everybody was entrusted to follow the day-to-day rules. So you weren't babied. You're not babied in the Marine Corps, and you're treated as an adult since day one, so they expect that from you.
Did you serve in any wars?
Yes.
How many wars did you serve?
One.
Which wars did you serve?
The war was called Operation Iraqi Freedom 2. It was the second half of the Iraqi war. I got deployed in 2004, and I came back in 2005, so I did a year in Iraq. And that was the only war that I did, and that was when I was in my reserve unit in 2nd Battalion, 24th Marines.
Where were you stationed?
I was in the southern Babel region of Iraq. We were stationed to protect 3 towns. They were called Lutafia, Muhammadiyah, and Yusufia. And the locals had given those 3 towns, the nickname the Triangle of Death, because there was so much fighting going on between the insurgents and the military.
Where were you in the front lines or back lines?
Both, you can say, because the part of the war that I served in, it was when we already occupied Iraq, and we were more of we're trying to take care of the insurgency that was going on. It wasn't a full frontal assault type of war now. It was a, they call it, the enemy used guerrilla tactics. They would hit us and then they would leave. So what we did is we established small bases called forward operating bases, and we worked out of there. So sometimes we were technically behind the lines because we were inside the base. So you were sort of safe. You were able to go to sleep and try to get some rest without having to be ready at all times. And then when it was time to get out of the wire, what we would call it, and go do a mission, then you were in the front lines. Yes, sometimes, but that's one of the perks of being in mortar transport, is that you always have a vehicle to carry it for you.
What type of things did you have to carry with you?
Your essentials, your weapon, always, that never left your sight, your vest, your flak, your helmet, your camel pack. We use camel packs instead of canteens. It's like a book bag that you carry, but instead of filling it with books or something, you fill it with water, and it has a little tube, and then you can just drink water from the tube. Your sleeping bag, any type of emergency equipment that you needed just in case something happened and you needed to take care of yourself from a wound or take care of your buddy from a wound. We tried not to carry a ton of stuff. One being if we were ever attacked and our vehicle was disabled, we normally destroyed the vehicle if it had some sensitive equipment in it. So you don't want to have to be trying to grab all your things after your vehicle has been taken out and then you're trying to destroy the vehicle. So sometimes, depending on the type of mission that we went on, we would carry our sleeping bags and our molly packs that carried everything. But if not, it was just whatever we had on our bodies, which was a ton of ammo and our weapon and our camel pack.
How heavy was all of your equipment that you had to carry?
I honestly don't know that answer. All I know is that even if it was light at times, if you carry it for a long time, anything becomes heavy.
Did you wear any protective gear?
Yes, we wore, it's called a Kevlar helmet, and the helmet is basically to protect you from what's called shrapnel or any type of debris that can fall on you. Shrapnel is something that comes apart. Like if there's a bomb, all the metal parts are just jagged and they just fly everywhere. So it would help you with the shrapnel. We also wore a vest, a Kevlar vest that would absorb some of the bullets if you ever got shot, and it would also absorb some of the shrapnel. We wore goggles for the sand especially. During the time that I was deployed, I had glasses, so I wore these big Coke bottle glasses, they called them, because it was so thick that I had to put them on, and then I would put on my protective goggles over it. Then we would wear a neck gaiter, they called it. It's kind of like a sleeve that you wear around your neck, and then it covers your mouth and it covers your neck, because if you're on top of a vehicle and you're traveling fast in the desert, all the sand, all the debris, you're breathing it in and it's hitting your skin. So it helped. Things like that. We wore knee pads, sometimes elbow pads, in case we ended up having to just take a dive somewhere in the rocks or on the dirt somewhere. It would help us so we won't be injured.
What jobs did you have during wartime?
One of the beautiful things about the Marine Corps that I love is that you may be a specific MOS, like I was mortar transport, but in the Marine Corps, you're taught how to do everybody else's job to a certain degree. You're not specialized in it, but it's called cross-training. And so what we did when I was deployed, it was around 30 of us in mortar transport, and we were supporting 3,000 Marines. So what they would do is they would attach one of us with a vehicle with a certain platoon, may it be a grunt platoon, which is the infantry, may it be EOD, which was the explosive ordnance, may it be with scout snipers, may it be with mortarmen. So I was actually lucky enough to do a different job every month. I lived under a bridge for a month because our job was to secure that bridge, because all our supplies were going through that bridge. And the insurgents, the enemy, they knew that. So every so often they would come and try to plant explosives or to mortar that bridge, and it was our job to keep that bridge secure, so we would have to go and engage them and keep them off the bridge. Another job that I had was called QRF. It's Quick Reaction Force, and our sole job there was we would have downtime, and we were kind of like on-call guys. If somebody else was getting attacked nearby and they needed help, they would call the QRF, and it was just a group of us in two Humvees, and we would go out there and help them out. So that was our sole job for a month. Whenever we weren't called out, we were down, we were in our racks, we were relaxing, and then the call came, get all your stuff on, and go and do what you gotta do.
What were your living conditions like during wartime? Did you sleep in tents, on the ground, in sleeping bags?
All of them. When I lived under the bridge, I lived in a little, it's called a one-man tent. So that was my home for a month. I lived out of a sleeping bag for 2 nights when I was with scout snipers, because we were tasked to watch a certain road because they were getting a lot of explosives planted. So we try to keep a lower profile. When I was back in our forward operating base, which was called FOB St. Michael, we lived in what used to be a chicken factory. So they gutted the factory. They just left the shell. And what we did is we packed a whole bunch of sandbags and all around it and fortified it. On the inside, we made wooden huts, and we fortified those with sandbags as well. And we had regular little cots to sleep in. So it was the homiest place that we had while I was there.
How was the food during wartime? Did you eat local food?
Very seldomly I ate local foods. One of the times I did eat local foods, I got very sick. So I was out of the game for about 3 to 4 days because it was called dysentery, and I was not able to function properly for that amount of time because I ate the local food. I was just not used to it, so it didn't take to me. Other than that, in the Marine Corps we have our own cooks, and they do the best they can, but the food does not come out very good. We rarely had a chance, as motor transport, we rarely had a chance to actually sit down in a cafeteria and eat food because we will leave before daylight came out, so we would have the cover of darkness. And by the time we came back, it was nighttime again. So we sometimes would miss breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we would eat what's called an MRE, a meal ready to eat. And they issued those to the military. And it has your essential calories in there. It has crackers, it has like different types of foods, chilies and stuff like that. Don't get excited, they don't really taste like chili. But it was enough to survive, you know. So for a while it was just pretty much, I was just eating the crackers and the water day to day until we were able to actually get somewhere and eat a good hot meal.
Can you explain what your surroundings were like? Can you describe the
Scenery.
I'll try. If you ever seen a picture of a desert, okay? It was like that at times, where there was just nothing but desert and just an open road. But then there was towns. Think of it as, for example, Baghdad is Chicago. You know, that's how it would seem. Baghdad was one of the biggest cities that they had. And if you went there, you would see cars. Just like here, you would have traffic jams. You would have a ton of people everywhere in their markets, you know, the kids going to school. And then as you get further and further out, just like here in Illinois, you get to the suburbs where it's very separated from the major population. You know, as things start quieting down, you know, houses start getting further apart from each other. Out there in the outskirts, in the towns, they didn't have running water, so you would see wells. You would see people cooking on outside ovens made out of clay, and you would see people working the fields. One thing that surprised me is that you would think that in the desert it's always hot, right? Turns out to be that it's not, because during winter at nighttime it's actually very, very cold. And I spent one of the coldest nights in my life in Iraq one night, and I've lived in Chicago since I was 5. So I'm used to the Chicago weathers. They didn't get snow out there in the desert or anything, but you would get frost at night. And there's not much to block the wind from hitting you at night. So it was very cold at night. You would walk around in your uniform, in your camouflage uniform during the day, and you would just get drenched with sweat. So you're walking around with a sweaty uniform, and then sometimes you have to fall asleep in it. And by the time you woke up in the morning, you could barely move because it was so stiff. Everything just froze. So you had to walk around a little bit into the sun again, and then back again. You're back to drenched. So hopefully that helps.
What was the weather like? Were you stationary?
Well, I inadvertently covered that one too. But yeah, we had very hot weather. It would reach up to, I believe it was like 120, 125 degrees sometimes. And at night, it would probably drop to like the 30s. But it was very cold at night. And during the day, it was very hot. But it was one of those things, it was a dry heat, not very much humidity. So it was sometimes bearable, as long as you drank a lot of water.
How did you feel while you were serving?
Very proud. When I got deployed the day after my 21st birthday. So I was still young. I was single. I had no dependents. So I would sign up for all these missions that the guys that I would see that were married and they had kids were kind of hesitant on doing, because you never really know what was going to come out of it. But I was a thrill seeker, and ever since I was little, that was the purpose I joined the military. It's because I wanted to serve in some type of battle, some type of war, and like I said, I wanted to prove it to myself. And while I was there, I knew that I was proving it to myself, and I told myself, if I can survive this, I can survive anything when I come back home. And it made me proud to serve my country. I knew my family was scared for me, but they were very proud of me as well. And it just gave me wings to do whatever I wanted to do. You can achieve whatever you want to do as long as you keep on fighting for it.
Were you given any shots? Vaccine to protect you from diseases, animals, or bug bites?
Yes. We're given a lot of shots. A lot of shots that most people here wouldn't get if you just live here, and you're not going to go to another country. One of the two most memorable shots that I got, one was for black typhoid, it's called. And that's not technically a shot because it's not a needle. It's a little fork, if you can call it that. And they dip it into this liquid which has black typhoid, I'm assuming dead cells, and they poke your arm with it. And you have to be quarantined, so that means you have to stay away from everybody else for a few days, and then you get a blister. Once that blister happens, then they know that your immune system starts trying to fight it off. And that's how your body gets any antibodies to try to fight off black typhoid if you would ever get it in another country. The other shot was a shot for anthrax. And if I remember correctly, it was a series of 6 shots. And they were every other week you would get them. And it was a thick liquid that they would inject into your arm, and it would make a big bump because it wouldn't dissolve right away. So you had to rub on it and rub on it and rub on it, and it would hurt. But that was said to help you try not to, try to fight off if you got attacked with anthrax, which is a very, very bad chemical.
How did you stay in contact with family or friends back home during wartime?
Whenever we could try to muster up the time to make contact, we had in our base a little hut which was a telephone and a computer hut. So you can actually get on the computer, and this was all through secure channels, and try to check your bank accounts, try to check your bills, because you still had to pay bills sometimes, people that were married and had children. We had phones, and we would try to make phone calls to our families, but there was so many of us that would, and if you had the chance to do it, then you would want to go do it. Sometimes guys would skip a meal because they had to be in line just so they can talk to their families. So that's how we would get into contact with them. Sometimes our sergeants had satellite phones, and if we weren't on any type of mission during the time, then they would allow us to make a phone call to our families. But satellite phones are very expensive, and it was usually the sergeants that paid out of pocket to try to get that connection going. But contacting your family during wartime is very important. It helps center you and refocus you on, staying safe, not getting too crazy out there, because that you have people back home waiting for you, and they're worried about you. So if you ever have anybody that deploys and they want to talk to you over the phone, and you're playing or you're reading something or you're doing some homework or something, just drop what you're doing for a few minutes, and talk to them, because it's a lifesaver to be able to talk to somebody back home, because guys do miss home. You're out there for so long. You start getting that separation anxiety that they call, because you miss home. It's so different out there that you just want to be able to hear somebody's voice to make you remember, okay, I'm going to be okay.
Were you able to travel around when you had downtime? Did you get to see any sights?
No, I was not able to travel around. During that deployment, we were confined to our base. Whenever we were on our downtime, for the simple reason that anybody that was outside the wall, we didn't know whether they were our friend or they were our enemy. So whenever we were out there, it was with the squad, and we were either patrolling or we were trying to do some other type of mission, and it was never about sightseeing, unfortunately. You did get to see certain things while you were driving, like going into Baghdad. You would see the statues, like Saddam's old statues that were knocked down. You got to see in Fallujah and in Baghdad, you got to see the palaces and stuff like that as you were driving through, but never to just stay there and enjoy the sights, unfortunately.
Was there anything that stood out about Gaiter or countrysides?
Was there anything that stood out about the countryside? It was beautiful at times, just to see the sky for once. Because growing up here in the city, we get so much light pollution that we're not able to actually appreciate how the sky looks at night. But when you're in the desert, there's not a light to be seen for miles sometimes, and the sky is so lit up with so many stars, and then you get to see the sunrise on the horizon sometimes, and you just see the desert wasn't all just sand and just cactuses. I never actually saw a cactus out there, but there was greenery, there was canals, there was people working the fields, like I said, and there was camels. So it was beautiful at times, yes.
If you were in a tropical country with lots of bugs, did you have bug repellent or nets to protect you?
It wasn't a tropical country, but there are bugs everywhere. A lot of spiders, snakes. One of them called this camel spider, and they're like these big white spiders that look like they're from the movie Alien. But we had nets to protect us, and what they would do also for our uniforms, before we got deployed, they sprayed them with a certain kind of DEET for bugs. It was more like an industrial type of DEET, so it was very, very strong, and it helped keep some of the bugs away.
What was your reaction? What was your reaction when you were off duty? What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
We try to have in wartime or when I was here in the country.
Wartime.
Since there wasn't much that we can do outside of the base, we would work out. We weren't afforded the opportunity to like play basketball or anything outside because our base was so small that we always had to have our flax and Kevlars on in case we ever got mortared, because that would happen a lot as well. All of a sudden we would start getting, if you know, my sergeant would be able to explain what a mortar is, but they're like bombs that they shoot out from a tube, and then they just land in random places. You don't know where they're gonna land, so we weren't allowed to do like sports outside. It was all basically concentrated inside that big chicken factory. And we would work out. We all had laptops that we bought out of our own money, and we would watch movies, play cards, try to just stay busy during the time that we're down before we got called out for a mission.
How did you deal with the different language and culture?
I don't know Arabic, so sometimes it was hard trying to communicate, but I found that if two people really want to communicate, you're going to end up communicating with somebody somehow. May it be with gestures, hand gestures, and a lot of languages are similar too. I know Spanish, so Arabic has some Spanish words in it, and we also had translators sometimes with us that were sometimes locals, and it would help incredibly trying to get to communicate with the population, to try to have them help us, have them trust us. During the time I was in Iraq, actually, I grew a very big mustache. And since I always had my mouth covered with the neck gaiter, they would think I was a local when I was out there. They thought I was a translator. The locals thought I was a translator. So I would get that a lot. You know, they would come up to me and start speaking to me in their own language, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you know, hold on, let me go get the translator. But those translators were a lifesaver.
Were you given any training or phrases to help you communicate with the local people?
Some. There's different things in their culture, for one, that we're taught not to do. You never shook their hand with your left hand. Even if you're a lefty, then you shake the hand with the right hand. They consider the left hand, I guess, like a dirty hand, and they don't use the left hand for things. Here, somebody goes like this to you, that means stop. It does not mean stop to them. That means nothing to them. So we would go like this. Hand gestures like that to try to communicate with some of them. Small words like you would say like kif, which meant get down or stop. Things that would help us try to just control the situation that we had until we can actually get a translator over.
Did any of the local citizens work on base where you were stationed?
Some, very, very few of them. 'Cause we were very, I guess, protective of our little base that we had. We didn't really trust any outside source other than our own. But for some of the work that was done for like our huts or the internet devices and stuff like that, we had some of the locals that had already gone through a vetting process to make sure that they were actually on our side. And they would have to come in every day, drive in, and they would get checked before they came into the gate. Thoroughly, their vehicle would get checked, they would get checked, and then they were let in, they would do their job, and then they would leave for the night.
Do you have any stories that you would like to share?
I have quite a few actually. But what kind of story would you like to hear? A happy story, a sad story, an exciting story? Happy, okay. One of the happiest things I saw there was when we first came to our forward operating base. Those 3 towns, they were, you can say that the locals had just picked up all their things and left in that instant. There was food on the table, there was chairs knocked over, there was toys on the floor. The schools were semi-destroyed. So people were gone and they were taken over by insurgents. And our job was to get the insurgents out of those towns so that people can come back. And when we first got there, the locals didn't like us. They didn't like us because they feared helping us. If they helped us, they would get hurt, or their families would get hurt. But here's the happy side, okay, that sounds sad. By the time we left, I got to see the little kids going back to their school, you know, having classes. I got to see people having their markets back up. I got to see people actually smiling at us, helping us, not be afraid to defend their own homes. I got to see them rebuilding their environment. I got to play a little bit of soccer with the kids. So that's one of the happiest things that I remember.
How did you adapt to the currency?
We used our own, since it was just within our own base. So we still used US dollars. The only currency that we ever got from the locals was anything that we wanted to collect. Sometimes, you know, we would pay them in our own currency and they would give us whatever they had. A lot of it was, I should have brought some of it. A lot of it was old currency that still had Saddam's face on it and stuff like that. But we didn't have that problem that we had to adapt to their currency since we used our own.
How did you return home?
We drove at first. From our base, we drove to Kuwait. It was a very long drive, nonstop. I don't remember exactly how long it took, but it took about a day, I believe. And once we got to Kuwait, we flew from a military plane into an airport that was close by. And then from that airport, we got into a commercial plane that was a civilian plane, and then we flew back here. And it was about, I think it's about a 17-hour flight. It was a very long flight.
How did you adjust to civilian life after serving?
It did take me a little while coming back and adjusting, because you're so used to being out in a different type of environment where you're always on. You're always on the lookout for everything. So it took me a while to calm down, to relax, but that's what family's for. You know, you have your family, you have your friends, and slowly but surely, you know, you came back to the norm, and you adapt it to home. Once you accept that you're home, then that's all that matters.
Do you have any siblings that serve in the military?
No, I am the only person in my family and my extended family that has ever served in the military.
Can you recall your instructors?
From boot camp? I can recall them. I don't remember their names anymore. There's different kinds of instructors that you get. There's different tiers of them, I guess you can say. You get your senior drill instructor, that's basically the dad of the family. He's there to look out for you, technically. So he keeps the other drill instructors in line while he's around. So as long as you saw him around, things weren't as bad. There was the knowledge drill instructor that taught you about the history of the Marine Corps, some combat tactics, and so on. There was a drill instructor that taught you about your weapon, the M16. We used the M16A4 service rifle, and he taught you how to march, taught you about your uniform, stuff like that. And then there was the dog drill instructor, they used to call him, because his sole purpose in life was to make your life miserable. So if he was the only one around, you knew something bad was going to happen. But you end up building a bond with all of them by the end of boot camp. And they'll come up to you and tell you, you know, you did good. You know, we pushed you like this because we wanted to see how far you can go. And it's an experience, I'll tell you that much.
What did your uniforms look like, and were they comfortable?
Our uniforms in the Marine Corps, like the green uniforms, there's the deltas, correct? And then there's the alphas, which they're green, and they're just for duty purposes. And then the distinctive uniform in the Marine Corps is the dress blues. That's one of the reasons I also joined the Marine Corps, because I loved the uniform. I did not bring it with me today, but it's if you ever have a chance to look it up, I think it's, I mean, I don't want to be biased, but I think it's the best looking uniform any military has. I love the uniform. They're comfortable in a sense that you feel, I don't know, you feel so alive, so strong when you wear these uniforms, you know. They're not meant for comfort. They're meant to look sharp, and they're meant to look professional, and they serve their purpose.
Were there different uniforms for different events?
Yes, the dress blues, for example, were for formal events. Like, for example, the Marine Corps Ball. That's where most people would wear their dress blue uniforms. And as you went up in rank, you were given different things to wear on your uniform. For example, once I reached E4 as a corporal, we were able to put it on what's called a blood stripe along the pant leg of our uniform, and you were allowed to buy a sword. You could carry around a sword if you want, and pretty much look amazing.
What gear were you provided for different weather conditions? Were you given long coats or long underwear if it was cold?
When I was deployed, when I was in Iraq, we wore a brand called Under Armour, and it was provided to us through the Marine Corps, and it's hot weather gear. So this gear you wear, this clothing you wear underneath your uniform, and it helps perspire the sweat from you to try to cool you down more. The only backdraw to those type of that type of gear is the material it's made out of. So if you were ever in a fire, then that would melt onto your skin. And it was very difficult to heal from that. So it was like a give and take. You know, you decided whether you're gonna wear cotton or you're gonna wear the Under Armour brand. We were given ponchos, just like anybody would wear here, but they were camouflaged ones for the rain. And we didn't really get much rain. So it was basically just our goggles and our neck gaiters that we used constantly because of the sand.
If your boots wore out, were you able to get new ones?
Yes, we had a person, we have a department designated for supply, and we would go to that person and request new gear, maybe the boots or maybe a backpack or some new pads or a new flak jacket or a new Kevlar if it got damaged. It wasn't always as easy to get gear on the spot, so you sometimes had to wait until a new shipment of gear came in and just hang on to whatever you had until the gear came.
How did you get paid? Did you get paid each week?
It's every 2 weeks, but it was directly deposited into our account, so you never really saw like a check or anything. Especially when you're deployed, you don't really keep track of your money because days go on and they just mix together. But that was one of the reasons why there was computers that we can log into whenever we had a chance to and check our accounts to see that everything was up to date.
Were you able to spend the money off base or did you send it home?
Most of the money I just kept in my bank here in the States. Here and there we would buy like any type of like toiletries or anything that we needed from a little store that was stationed with us as well. And we would, whatever that little store provided, we would get from there if we wanted. And if not, most of the guys just pretty much kept all their money. When I was deployed, I was a Lance Corporal, so I wasn't really making much money to begin with. I think I came back with $14,000 for the year I was deployed in Iraq. So you try to save up as much as you can.
Was it enough to live on?
Over there, yes, because everything was provided for you. You had your bed wherever it was that day. You had your food wherever it was, whatever it was that day. You had the clothes on your back, so we lived on bare minimum. So yeah, it was more than enough.
Did you encounter any animals, wild or domestic?
Yes, we saw camels. We saw camel spiders. We saw some snakes. A lot of stray dogs. Some of the two of the dogs we actually adopted while we were out there because they were like a German Shepherd mixed type of dog, and they actually ended up being good guard dogs for us when we were out in a house that was empty and we had taken over it for a while, and we would use that guard dog because they were, as long as you fed this dog, the dog loved you and he hated everybody else, so it worked out.
Where were you when the war ended?
I was back here in the States. I was already out of the military by the time the war ended. So I was already in the civilian, as a civilian when the war ended.
What were your experiences at the end of the war or end of your military service?
At the end of the war, I was already a civilian and I was already working, and I had already met my girlfriend who became my wife, and we were already expecting our first child. So that's who I was when the war ended. When my military service ended, because you get to be, it's called in the inactive ready reserves for a few years where they can call you back if they needed you. So technically, when my military service ended, I was already out of the Marine Corps, and then I got released.
Did you receive any medals?
I received a few. I guess one of the highest medal you can say that I received was the Purple Heart, and that's given to military personnel that gets wounded while in combat.
Did you have any children?
Do I have any children now? Yes, I have 3 children. I have a 10-year-old boy who's also named Ruben. I have a 7-year-old girl, Alyssa, and I have a 5-year-old girl, Sophia.
Did you have any friends when you were serving?
Yes.
Did you keep
Sorry.
in contact with any veterans who served while you did?
Yes, I've kept in contact with a few of my buddies. A few of them live in other states. Some of them ended up living here in Illinois, so those are the ones that contact the most. But yeah, and when you're in the military, you have a ton of friends. We're all brothers. You know, we call each other brothers. We may not be related, blood related, but we are family. So not having friends is not anyone's, like, you never have to worry about not having any friends in the military, just to put it that way. And yeah, you tend to get a deeper bond with the guys that you served with when you deploy, and you tend to keep in touch with them more.
What did you learn from the time in service?
I learned to appreciate what you have. I learned that nothing is really free. Anything that you have, there's a price to be paid. You as little kids, all you have, your parents give it to you, right? So it's not free. Your parents have to work hard for it. They provide it for you. When you're in the military, you learn and you see how other people live. For example, in Iraq, how they have to still work the fields, how they have no running water, they have no electricity, have no heat, have no cooling. They pretty much live the way people used to live a long time ago. And I learned that it's hard for people that have grown up with everything to fully appreciate what they have, because they've never seen people that don't have it. It's one of the things that you get to see when you're in the military and you travel, is how good we have it here in the United States. And a lot of people take that for granted.
Do you have any photos or objects still as memories?
I do. Unfortunately, I didn't bring any. But a lot of old pictures. We're able to buy some of the old cameras that you take to Walgreens and get the film developed. So we took a lot of random pictures while we were out there. A lot of pictures of us in country. The currency that we collected. Some guys brought back shrapnel that was pulled out of their bodies as a souvenir. Things like that. You know, a lot of, I brought back these cloths that were made out of silk that we got to actually buy from one of the locals. I liked the design, and it reminded me of the designs that were all around that country, so I brought those back as well. And I have those in my basement.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations? If so, which ones?
I'm a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars.
How do you think the military now compares to when you served?
I think the military now, it hasn't been so long that the military has changed, because I served in country in 2004, so it hasn't been that long. But I think the military has made a lot of advances in technology. I think that our military gets more supplies that they were lacking back then, and I hope that they're better funded now, because like I said, when I was in country it was bare minimum, and for us to be such a great military, we were hurting sometimes, but hopefully that changes now.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
Oh, wow. Be proud of your country. Be proud of where you grew up, where you live, what you have. Don't take things for granted, because just like material things don't come free, it's true what they say, freedom isn't free. Somebody had to pay the price in order for everyone here to be free to do what they want.
We'd like to thank you for service, and thank you for coming today and sharing your story with us, and the many people that will see this in the future.
Thank you for having me.